High in the northern mountains, where clouds brushed the peaks and icy winds carved their way through ancient trees, there stood a small village tucked inside a valley of whispers. This village was quiet, so quiet that sometimes even the wind slowed down to listen. Time here did not rush. It simply passed by gently, almost respectfully. And on the uppermost edge of this village, on a lonely hilltop wrapped in pine trees and winter frost, stood a small wooden cottage. It belonged to a young woman named Nara. Everyone in the village knew Nara. Every child, every elder, every widow, every laborer, every shepherd, even travelers who passed by only once remembered her name. Not because she was rich, not because she was extraordinary in looks or strength, but because she carried something rare in her heart, an endless willingness to help others. If someone fell sick, Nara stayed by their side all night. If a widow had no one to support her, Nara built her a small shelter. If an elderly man needed firewood, Nara climbed the steep forest slopes and brought it down herself. If a child cried alone, Nara sat beside him, told stories, wiped tears, and made him laugh again. She helped the weak. She stood by the lonely. She lifted burdens silently. She gave warmth to others even while freezing inside. People called her kind. People called her pure. People called her a blessing. But no one noticed one truth, a truth so quiet that even Nara had stopped hearing it. The giver was slowly becoming empty. Nara's life was a circle that never paused. She woke up before dawn. She slept long after the stars had come out. She moved from task to task, person to person. Her hands worked, her feet walked, her back bent. Her heart absorbed everyone's pain. But who absorbed hers? No one, not even she herself. At first, the work was simple, helping one neighbor, then another, but soon, everyone depended on her. Not because they couldn't live without her, but because they had become accustomed to her, and Nara. She could not say no. Her days began with knocking on the door. "Nara, can you watch my children today?" "Nara, my roof is leaking, can you fix it?" "Nara, could you carry water for me?" "Nara, I slipped and hurt my ankle, please help me." "Nara, my husband is sick, could you come?" Nara, Nara, Nara. Every voice pulled a piece of her away. And every time she replied gently, "Yes, I will help." Even when her bones ached, even when her eyes stung with sleeplessness, even when she felt her chest tighten from exhaustion, people praised her goodness, but no one questioned her silence. No one wondered if she was okay, because helpers are assumed to be strong. Givers are assumed to be limitless. They forget, even the strongest hands tremble when they are never allowed to rest. Even the warmest hearts grow cold when they are never given warmth back. And slowly, Nara began to change. Her smiles became smaller. Her breathing became heavier. Her shoulders drooped a little more each day. Her voice lost its spark. Her feet ached from walking all day. Her nights became restless, but still, she kept going. Because she believed the same lie many of us secretly carry. If I stop, everything will fall apart. But then came the morning, the harshest winter morning of the year, the morning that changed everything. The Diwi Nara fell, the sky was covered in thick gray clouds. The wind was so cold it felt like a blade. Snow had hardened into slippery ice under every step. Not a single bird sang. Nara woke up even before sunrise, shivering under her blanket. Her muscles were stiff, her back hurt, and her head felt heavy. But before she could even stretch, someone knocked on her door. She opened it slowly. An old man stood outside, trembling in the cold. "Nara, forgive me for coming so early. I need to take water up the hill. The buckets are too heavy for me. Could you help?" Nara looked at him. She wanted to say she was tired. She wanted to say her body couldn't handle more weight today. She wanted to say she needed rest, but her lips said what they always said, "Yes, I'll come." She wrapped a shawl around herself, lifted the ice-cold buckets, and began the steep climb beside the old man. The path was slippery. The wind was merciless. Her hands were numb. Her shoulders burned with the weight. Her breath came out in painful gasps. Step by step, she pushed herself, her vision blurred. Her fingers felt like stone. Her legs grew weaker and weaker. Finally, halfway up the hill, she stopped. Her knees trembled. Her hands shook violently. Her heart pounded too fast. Then Nara collapsed. The buckets fell. Water spilled across the snow, and Nara lay unconscious on the cold ground. The old man cried out for help. Villagers rushed from their houses. They lifted Nara gently. Her lips were pale. Her hands were freezing. They carried her to the village doctor Mira. Mira's truth Mira was not just a healer. She was a wise woman with eyes that saw beyond the surface. She checked Nara's heartbeat. She felt her cold hands. She looked into her tired face. Then she sighed and said softly, "Child, your body is not sick. Your heart is exhausted." Nara forced her eyes open. "But people need me," she whispered. Mira shook her head. "They don't need you. Child, they have simply learned to depend on you. You have taught them that you will always say yes. But tell me, how long can you carry the world on tired shoulders?" Nara blinked. A tear rolled down her cheek. Mira continued, "You think you are helping them, but you are teaching them that they don't need to help themselves. You think the village will collapse without you, but the truth is..." She paused, then said gently, "You are collapsing, not the village." Nara's lips quivered. Mira reached into her pocket and pulled out a small cloth pouch. Inside were tiny pebbles. She placed the pouch in Nara's hand. "Listen carefully," she said. "Whenever you feel tired, truly tired, put one pebble inside this pouch, and when the pouch becomes full, you must stop. No matter who calls you, no matter who complains, no matter how guilty you feel." Nara held the pouch weakly. "But what if they get angry?" she asked. Mira smiled. "Let them be. Anger is momentary. Your life is not." Then she whispered softly, "Even the sky rests at night. Why don't you?" The first pebble the next morning, Nara was still weak but awake. The frost outside had not melted. The village was busy as always. Soon enough, someone knocked. A woman stood at her door, holding tools. "Nara, my fence broke last night. Can you fix it? Please, it's urgent." Nara felt her heart race. She knew she should help. She wanted to help, but her body whispered, "Please, not today." For the first time, she listened. She reached into the pouch, picked up a small pebble, and dropped it inside. The sound of the pebble hitting the pouch was tiny, but it felt like a storm inside her heart. Then she looked at the woman and said, gently, "I'm sorry, I can't come today. I need to rest." The woman froze, her eyebrows lifted. She looked shocked, almost offended. Nara, saying no, impossible. But Nara closed her door slowly and leaned against it, breathing heavily. It felt strange, it felt wrong. It felt unfamiliar, but it also felt relieving. She sat on her bed, wrapped herself in a blanket, and for the first time in years she rested. What she didn't know yet was that this small decision, this single pebble, was going to change the entire village, and her life forever. Nara's first no felt like a mountain pressing on her chest. As she sat inside her quiet cottage, wrapped in a blanket, the world outside seemed unfamiliar, as if she were watching her own life from a distance. She wasn't used to stillness. She wasn't used to choosing herself. Her hands kept twitching, her mind kept whispering, Maybe I should go, maybe I should help, maybe I should not have said no. But then she remembered Mira's words, even the sky rests at night. Why don't you? So she stayed inside. She rested. Outside, however, the village was buzzing. Word spread quickly. Nara said no. Nara refused to help. Nara didn't come today. Nara stayed home. Some were shocked. Some were angry. Some simply confused, and some, just a few, wondered quietly if she was all right. By the evening, people began to complain among themselves. What is wrong with her? She never says no. She has changed. Maybe she is becoming selfish. She used to help everyone. They forgot that the same girl had carried their burdens for years. They forgot her trembling hands. They forgot her sleepless nights. They forgot her collapse in the snow. Because when someone gives endlessly, people stop seeing the effort. They only see the convenience, but Nara didn't hear any of this. For once, the world outside moved without her. The next morning arrived gently. The sunlight passed through cracks in her window, and for the first time in a long time, Nara woke up without a pounding headache. She stretched slowly, surprised at how heavy her body still felt, not from new exhaustion, but from years of accumulated fatigue finally surfacing. Then, knock knock, another request. A man stood at the door, holding a sack of grain. Nara, could you carry this up the slope? My back hurts today. Nara opened her mouth, habit ready to say yes, but her body spoke louder. She felt tired again. She reached into her pouch, picked another pebble, and dropped it in. The sound echoed inside her heart. Second pebble, second boundary. She shook her head gently. I can't today, I'm sorry. The man frowned, scratched his chin, muttered under his breath, strange, very strange. Then he walked away. Nara closed the door softly, leaned forward, and exhaled deeply. It still felt difficult, but the guilt this time was a little smaller. A tiny seed of self-respect was beginning to grow inside her. And day by day, pebble by pebble, that seed grew. The village begins to shift at first. The villagers struggled. They were not used to doing things on their own. They had always relied on Nara, sometimes without even realizing it. It wasn't that they were incapable. They had just forgotten their own strength. When the elders needed firewood, they waited for Nara. But she didn't come. When a widow's roof needed patching, she waited for Nara, but she didn't come. When someone needed help carrying water, they called Nara, but she didn't come. She wasn't refusing out of arrogance. She was simply listening to her tired heart. At first, frustration filled the village, but frustration slowly transformed into something else, necessity. Then necessity became action. One cold morning, 2 teenage boys saw an old man struggling with firewood. They exchanged glances and quietly walked over. I'll carry the bundle. I'll help him up the slope. They didn't wait for Nara. They didn't call her. They simply did what needed to be done. A few days later, women gathered to cook a meal for a widow who was alone. One brought rice, another brought vegetables, someone brought spices. We can do this, they said. We've done it before, we just forgot. Men gathered tools and repaired roofs together. Children fetched water for elders. Families sat together in the evenings, talking, supporting, sharing. Suddenly, something wonderful happened. The village began to discover its own strength. And slowly, very slowly, the complaints faded. People began to understand that Nara had been carrying far too much. They realized they had placed expectations on her that were never fair. They realized they had forgotten their own abilities, and they began to miss her not as a helper, not as labor, but as a person. As a soul, someone they cared about, someone they wanted to heal. Nara's restoration. Meanwhile, Nara stayed home most days. At first it felt uncomfortable, almost wrong, but as days passed, she began to rediscover herself. She learned to breathe again, to sit in silence, to watch the sunrise without rushing to work, to drink water slowly instead of gulping it in between tasks, to sleep deeply without guilt, to wake without someone knocking on her door. She began noticing little things she had long forgotten, the way sunlight painted warm patterns on her wooden floor, the fluttering wings of small birds outside her window, the crisp smell of pines in the morning breeze, the peace in doing absolutely nothing. She began writing again. She began singing lightly to herself. She cooked for pleasure, not for duty. She rebuilt her connection with her own soul. Every night, she emptied the pouch and placed the pebbles in a bowl. And every night, she saw how many times she had chosen herself that day. Some days she placed one pebble. Some days 2 or 3. Some days none. There was no right or wrong. There was only balance, a balance she had never known before. And as her pouch became lighter over the weeks, Nara's heart became lighter with it. Her eyes regained their spark. Her shoulders rose with strength instead of strain. Her steps became firmer. Her smiles became genuine. Her breath became deep and calm. She was healing. The village transformed after weeks passed. The village had quietly reshaped itself. It was no longer dependent on a single person. It had become united, strong, capable. People were helping one another. Neighbors were checking on each other. There was laughter where before there had been only silence. Children played together while adults worked side by side. The valley felt more alive, more connected, more balanced, and every now and then someone would ask, "Has anyone seen Nara lately? How is she feeling? I hope she is recovering. Maybe we should visit her." Their tone had changed. Their hearts had softened. They finally understood her value not as a worker, but as a human being. The final visit one afternoon, as sunlight melted the snow on the mountaintops, Mira climbed the hill to visit Nara. She knocked gently. The door opened and Mira paused. Nara stood there, not tired, not broken, not pale, but glowing. Her eyes were calm. Her hair rested softly over her shoulders. Her smile was peaceful. "Nara," Mira whispered, "you look alive." Nara looked down shyly. "I feel alive," she replied, for the first time in years. Mira stepped inside. They sat near the window as warm light touched their faces. Nara said softly, "At first, I thought the village needed me. I thought everything depended on me. I thought if I stopped, everything would fall apart." Mira smiled knowingly. "But the world did not fall apart, did it?" Nara shook her head slowly. "No, it became stronger." The healer leaned closer. "And do you know why?" she asked gently. "Because when you learned to take care of yourself, the village learned to take care of itself." Nara's eyes glistened. She whispered, "I didn't know resting could heal more than my body. It healed my relationships too." Mira nodded. "You taught them balance by choosing balance yourself. You taught them strength by revealing your weakness. And you taught them love by finally giving that love to yourself." Nara looked outside at the mountains, tall and steady against the horizon. "I used to think helping everyone made me strong," she said. "But I realized something." She placed her hand over her chest. "You cannot pour from an empty heart. You cannot lift others when your own spirit is broken, and you cannot heal the world while hurting yourself." Mira touched her hand gently. "That, child, is the wisdom most people never learn." The lesson of Nara. Weeks later, Nara slowly returned to the village, not as a savior, not as a rescuer, not as someone who fixed everything, but as a part of the community. People welcomed her warmly, some apologized, some thanked her, some simply hugged her, and Nara, she helped again, but only when her pouch had room, only when her heart had space, only when her body felt capable, only when her spirit said yes. The pouch stayed with her, always. A reminder of balance, a reminder of boundaries, a reminder of self-respect, and the village never fell back into old habits. It remained united, it remained active, it remained stronger than before, because one girl finally learned to rest. And through her rest, the whole world around her healed. The message for all of you, as many of us are like Nara. We give too much, we care too deeply, we carry burdens that are not ours. We let people depend on us too heavily. We say yes even when our soul screams no. We forget ourselves in the process of helping everyone else. But remember, you cannot heal the world if you are breaking inside. You cannot be strong if you never allow yourself to rest. You do not become weak when you pause, you become human, and when you choose to take care of yourself, the world around you becomes stronger too.